Anabasis. In Greek, it means to march upward, to ascend. But not every ascent leads toward glory. Sometimes it is simply the long climb home. History remembers emperors, conquerors, kings. But greatness is not their monopoly. More often than not, greatness is quiet. A father who returns home every evening after another exhausting day. A soldier who remains awake while everyone else sleeps. A physician who refuses to abandon the wounded. A citizen who fulfills his duty despite knowing no one will ever remember his name. Responsibility has no audience. In 401 BC, 10,000 Greek mercenaries found themselves stranded deep inside the Persian Empire. Their employer was dead. Their generals had been murdered. They were surrounded by enemies. Nearly 1,500 miles from home, there was no king coming to rescue them, no reinforcements, and no hope of relief. By every reasonable measure, they should have disappeared into history. Instead, they marched, and leading them was not Alexander, not Caesar, and not Hannibal. It was a 29-year-old Athenian who hadn't even intended to become a general. His name was Xenophon. In 401 BC, the Persian Empire stretched farther than any kingdom the Greeks had ever imagined. It ruled from Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia. At its head sat the King of Kings, Artaxerxes II. But every empire has rivals, and sometimes their family. The challenger to the Shahanshah is his brother, Cyrus the Younger. He's ambitious, capable, charismatic, confident, the younger brother and the mother's favorite. Cyrus believed something dangerous, that the wrong man sat upon the throne of the King of Kings, that the empire belonged to him. His only problem, though, he needs an army. The Persians stand divided, so he hires Greeks. Greek hoplites had become legendary throughout the Mediterranean. Their discipline, their armor, their phalanx made them some of the finest heavy infantry in the ancient world. Among the thousands of Greeks answering Cyrus's call was an Athenian named Xenophon. Not a famous general, not a celebrated hero, simply another educated Greek looking for opportunity and perhaps adventure. The secret was that these Greek mercenaries believed they're marching against rebellious tribes. Weeks pass, then months. The army keeps moving east, crossing rivers, passing the shattered bones of forgotten empires, going deeper and deeper into Persian territory. Eventually, the soldiers began asking questions. Naturally, there was just one problem. Rebellions don't require marching nearly 1,000 miles into the heart of the Persian Empire. Cyrus finally told them the truth. They were not marching against rebels. They were marching against the King of Kings, the Shahanshah of Persia himself. Why didn't they leave? Some wanted to. Many protested. But Cyrus persuaded them. He increased their pay, made promises, appealed to their sense of honor. Some stayed because of loyalty, others because turning back was almost as dangerous as going forward. Before them lay the greatest empire on earth, and behind them, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of wilderness. There would be no turning back. Soon, they would reach a place where one man's ambition would become 10,000 men's nightmare. Everything would change at Cunaxa. Dust. thousands of men advancing beneath the Mesopotamian sun. The Greeks smashed everything in front of them, as they almost always did. On the Greek right, the Persian line collapsed. Victory seemed inevitable. But battles aren't always decided where you're fighting. Sometimes they're decided somewhere you can't even see. Cyrus the Younger spotted his brother, Artaxerxes. The throne was only a few hundred yards away. Instead of letting the battle unfold, he charged impetuously and straight at the King of Kings, the Shanshah. One spear, one javelin, one moment, and Cyrus the Younger was dead, and with him everything the Greeks had marched for. The Greek hoplites looked around. They had won their battle, yet somehow lost the war. Their employer was dead. The Persian throne still stood, and they were nearly 1,500 miles from Greece, surrounded by an empire that now wanted revenge. Artaxerxes offered peace. The Greeks could go home. Their generals agreed to negotiate. They entered the Persian camp unarmed, trusted the king's word. They never came back. The Persian satrap Tissaphernes had them seized and executed one by one, and overnight the army had lost its leadership. Clearchus, Proxenus, Aegeus, Socrates, not the Socrates, but a warrior and commander with the same name. Men who had commanded thousands were now gone. No commander, no plan, no food, no allies, no king, and no home. What happens when 10,000 soldiers wake up and discover there is no one left to lead them now? Night fell. No campfires, no celebration, only fear. 10,000 men waiting for someone else to decide what came next. No one did. That night, Xenophon couldn't sleep. Not because he was a general, he wasn't. Not because anyone expected him to lead, no one did. He was simply another officer, watching an army die before it had even taken another step. According to Xenophon himself, he dreamt a thunderbolt struck his father's house. He awoke. Whether it was truly a sign from the gods or merely the conscience of an ordinary man, it forced him to ask a question. If no one leads, who survives? The next morning, he stood before men older than himself, more experienced, more accomplished, men who had every reason to ignore him, and he spoke. He did not promise victory. He couldn't. He did not promise rescue. None was coming. He promised only this, that surrender guaranteed death. Marching at least offered hope. Something changed. Not because Xenophon was the greatest soldier there, but because somebody had finally accepted responsibility. New commanders were elected, not appointed by kings, not chosen by nobles, chosen by the men themselves. Xenophon was among them. The army had not escaped. It had not eaten. It was still surrounded. But for the first time since Cunaxa, it had direction. And direction is often the first step toward survival. Ahead lay mountains, rivers, snow, Persian cavalry, hungry tribes, endless miles. Home was still almost 1,500 miles away. Their Anabasis had only just begun. History often imagines leadership as ambition, but sometimes leadership is simply the refusal to let everyone else despair. Xenophon had accepted responsibility. Now, He had to earn it. The Greeks turned north. Home lay somewhere beyond mountains no Greek army had ever crossed. Behind them rode the greatest empire on earth. Ahead, hunger, ruins, river, snow, tribes that had never heard of Athens. Every mile home had to be fought for. The passes narrowed. Persian cavalry disappeared, but new enemies emerged. The Carduchians, masters of the mountains. They shadowed the Greeks, day after day, never offering battle, only arrows, stones, and ambushes. And then winter came. Men froze where they stood. Horses collapsed. Supplies vanished. Some soldiers simply sat down and never rose again. Xenophon wasn't always right. He argued, improvised, failed, adapted. Leadership wasn't certainty. It was movement, because an army that keeps moving can still survive. Weeks became months. Mountains became valleys. Valleys became mountains again. Nearly 1,500 miles of fear, hunger, discipline, hope. Until one morning, a soldier standing high above the others began to shout, "The sea! The sea!" The cry spread backwards, from ridge to ridge, from soldier to soldier, until 10,000 exhausted Greeks were shouting the same word, Thalata, the sea. Home was finally possible. But even then, the journey wasn't over. The army still had to march along the coast, find ships, fight more battles, survive politics, and eventually return to Greece. Xenophon eventually wrote the story himself. He called it Anabasis, the march up. But history remembered something else, the march home. For more than 2,000 years, soldiers have read this account. Alexander the Great almost certainly knew it. Roman generals studied it. Modern military academies still do. Not because Xenophon never failed, but because he showed what leadership looks like when failure is already behind you. We celebrate the conqueror, the emperor, the king. But civilizations survive because ordinary people choose responsibility at precisely the moment everyone else is waiting for someone else to act. Xenophon never set out to become a great man. History asked something of him, and he answered. Perhaps greatness is not found in those who seek history, but in those who accept responsibility when history unexpectedly finds them. And that is the burden of greatness.